Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Fallout Season 1, Episode 4. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Cooper and Lucy, continuation of their story. The first thing we pick up with them is them coming across Roger, and how and kind of giving us a better insight into the Ghouls situation. So it seems like it is what I thought. The medication that, or the vials that Cooper takes are meant to keep him from going essentially feral. And the example I used last episode was like, if you've never seen iZombie, basically zombies have humanity. They're basically functioning humans. They're not like brainless monsters, but they become like that when they don't eat brains. They go too long without brains, they become feral. Seems like that's happening. And we meet Roger, who's in the process. And it kind of makes sense that a lot of ghouls would know each other. I guess a lot of ghouls act as bounty hunters in this world because Roger's out here looking for the same bounty too. But it's like, yeah, you need those bounties. It's like, what do you spend your money on? Well, you spend money on the vials that keep you going. The question is, like, who developed that? Is that some vault tech stuff? Because, like, how did that come into play? Because Roger said it was like, it took like 28 years for him to really start showing signs. I guess, like, maybe it's like a slow deterioration of going feral, and like everyone's kind of like been on that cusp and pulled themselves back, but maybe Cooper's never fully ever, like not fully, but ever touched that line, because they were like, yeah, you're the only one that we've ever come across that's never, like, it seems like later on, because you start to wonder, could it be that Cooper might not ever go to the extent that the ghouls have, like where they'll lose their minds and become feral, that maybe he just straight up dies. But later on, Lucy asks, like, oh, will you become like them if you don't keep these vials? And he's like, yes. So, but I guess he's just never gotten to that point at all. He's always been able to keep the vials up, or maybe that's just, for whatever reason, Cooper's constitution. Maybe it has to deal with him as a person trying so hard to, despite going down the path he has where he's lost himself and just become like, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to survive, that there's still so much of Cooper in him fighting, like he has too strong of a will to ever cross that line. Because he don't go specific, because they're like, oh, how long have you been holding out? And he was like, a long time. He doesn't get specific with it. Because Cooper isn't someone who likes to drown in the past. It's like today is today and tomorrow's tomorrow. That's all that's guaranteed, and that's all we have. So all we have is today. So I think that's why Lucy saw it as, oh, that's mean and terrible to do what you did. But it's also like, once again, it is Lucy coming into a situation she doesn't understand. As we see later on in the episode, she doesn't understand how the ghouls operate. And so when she sees him killing Roger, because notice what he did. He was like, oh, remember like the other stuff we tasted? It's like, oh yeah, this and apple pie. And he's distracting him. And so like the moment Roger turned his head, kablowy. But like she looks at it as like, oh my God, how could you do that? You're terrible. Like almost like, whoa, this guy was a friend of yours. How could you just like put him down like that? But for Cooper, it's like, I'm not going to explain to you something you don't understand. You're going to sit here and judge me. Like it's kill or be killed, you know. And he's kind of like, which is also interesting knowing that ghouls can eat other ghouls, because he starts, it's like, right, he's going to die anyway, so might as well like eat some of his flesh. I don't know if that's like, maybe that's just naturally what ghouls eat. I mean, maybe they eat people too, but it's like, right, I'm not trying to eat you, and maybe that staves off some of that transformation. Who knows? Because he just, maybe it's like, maybe that's also how he keeps himself from transforming, is by like, right, I eat other ghouls. It's not a one-to-one, but it'd almost be like a vampire instead of drinking human blood. Like, no, I'm gonna focus on other vampires. You know, I mean, the traditional things like vampires will like eat rats and stuff, but they don't want to eat human flesh and stuff like that. So that whole point, right? So I wonder, is that his go-to of like, right, when I'm like low on vials, I eat other ghoul flesh, just that either it's just like, oh, it makes me stronger and it builds up my own resistance and keeps me going from like drowning into this whole like losing myself thing. It's unclear. But it's like, yeah, Lucy's there judging him when she doesn't know anything about this world. You've been out in this world, how many? It probably hasn't been that long. I mean, who knows how much time has passed since she left Vault 33. But it's like, yeah, you've only been out in this world for a small percentage of time. I've been around for a long time. Once again, why she's so optimistic and positive, whereas like someone like Cooper is so jaded. you know. The world makes you into that, and that becomes like this interesting. It's that point I was kind of making last episode too. I mean, it's not just with these two characters, but with a lot of characters, including Maximus, but specifically in this episode too. That balancing act of who you were versus who you are now versus who you might become later on, type of situation, and that how that's reflected in Lucy and Cooper's characters of like, you know. Once again, how far are you willing to go to change to become, you know, because she's gotten her hands dirty because Cooper was like, you know what, since we're going question to question, how about I ask, why am I doing all the work? Get over there and get to someone that slicing off some ass jerky. And, you know, Lucy does it. I mean, she's done more and more grotesque things. I mean, first she had to like slice off Wilzig's head 2 episodes ago, and now it's like a thing of, oh cool, I have to slice this dude up. I mean, it seems like it's not like Cooper ate all of them. It's just like he sliced all pieces of them. Maybe like it's not possible to eat all parts of the ghoul. Maybe only can eat what might be like fresher bits. I don't know. There's so much we don't know about that. But like I said, Cooper didn't go into it, but I think there was an element of mercy, like professionally, but also one ghoul to another, because it's like, right, like you're already like tiptoeing into like feral territory, and you don't have any vials. I don't have any thanks to Lucy, but even if he did have any vials, would he have given Roger one? Who knows what their history would have been, that maybe he would have felt comfortable giving him one, maybe not. But yeah, as they're trudging along, they come across some water, which makes me wonder, the water that Cooper had ahead of time, like the one he had drunk last episode and basically taunted Lucy with, because she's like, oh, can I get some? And he'd like guzzled it all down, and then what little was left he just poured out on the ground just to be a dick. But he comes over to some water, and that's why I'm like, oh, was the water he had in his canteen before already radiated? Because she's noticing the radiation water, but she's just like, I'm so thirsty, I don't care, I don't know what it's going to do to me. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, it's high levels of it's enough radiation, obviously it's picking up on her device, but it's like, I'm so thirsty. But she's like, see, like in this moment, he's like, now you understand, you know, when it's all said and done, like you want to act like you're better than us, but like you have your worries about the world, but look at it when the time comes, like you're just kind of like, I'm thirsty, I don't care. And she's like, what are you? He's like, I'm what you and I are going to be a lot alike soon enough. This is what you'll end up, you know, eventually, which could be a multitude of things of like, yeah, enough radiation, you'll end up like me, or just long enough in this world, you're going to end up like me. Once again, everyone's telling her she's going to have to adapt and change to become what she needs to survive. She ended up biting off Cooper's finger when she tried to run away, and he like hog-tied her and yanked her back, and he was holding her down, and she bit off his finger, and then he proceeded to cut off her finger, which, to be fair, she took that like a champ, because it's like she wasn't screaming in pain, like, which I was like, interesting. What does that say about people in this universe? Him, it makes sense. He's a ghoul. He can't really, I mean, he can feel pain, but it's like, it doesn't stop him. Whereas like her, she literally got her finger sliced off, but maybe it's like she's so like beaten down, tired, and delirious that like it didn't even register. I don't know, but like he cut off her finger. I don't know what he did with it. I don't think he ate it, but it turns out he's keeping her in decent enough condition because he's trying to sell her for more vials, which he does. Granted, he passes out outside before the deal was done, which I also thought was so interesting with the whole Lucy thing of why does Snip Snip, which kind of makes sense why he's got the nickname that he does, because he's the one that performs the surgeries and stuff. But either way, like, what was the purpose of giving her a new finger if you were just going to slice her up and take her organs? I don't know if it's going to be like, we're taking all your organs or some of them. I'm like, well, why stop at some when you can have all of them? And they're trying to make it seem like, oh, this will be painless and you'll be fine. I'm like, you'll probably be dead, because I'm sure they're just going to take all your organs. Why would they, like, once again, they have a viable human. Why would they only take some? But like I said, what would be the point of just fixing her finger? Maybe that's kind of lower her guard. I don't know. Maybe there's some twisted notion of, hey, let's treat the stock well, just so it's like, the organs are in better condition or something like that, if she's more relaxed rather than being so fearful. Granted, she's still fearful when you're coming out of a spinning buzzsaw just to slice her up to get her organs. I love that whole bit of where he was like, so, where are you from? And she doesn't say anything. He's like, yeah, I'll have to visit there someday. I'm like, the automated response is so good. That whole scene was twisted. But Lucy manages to get away. She finds basically some like acidic poison and is threatening the two guys. And she's like, what was it? She said, oh yeah, like, let me go or the robot gets it. They're like, yeah, but it's like a robot. And they're like, yeah, you're better off like threatening. What was it? They referenced some kind of machinery and being like, yeah, you might better off be threatening that. Because it's like, doesn't matter to us. But she threatened him with the poison. And it's like, yeah, let all those people go, the ghouls. But they didn't let all of them go. They let some of them go. Going back to the point I made of Lucy doesn't understand the ghoul situation. Context clues are there being like, okay, he's asking about vials. Like, he found out about his vials being smashed last episode by me accidentally. And this guy, Roger's trying to hold on to his humanity, but, you know, her ignorance just won't let it. She's like, right, you got to let these people go. And he's like, no, you don't want to do that. But she forces their hand. And the people that get released are, I guess that's the argument where it's like, well, the people that were released were like still conscious enough. They were still themselves. I don't know if those are other ghouls that were being sold. Maybe they had debts to pay, like why they were, like, were they going to be harvested for their organs? I would assume not with the radiation and being ghouls and everything, but who knows? But yeah, the people they let go, like Martha in particular, but the other, because Martha seemed like she was very much on the edge of like fully going feral. She was already there because the only thing she could say over and over again was, "My name is Martha." Whereas Roger could hold a conversation to some extent. The other ghouls couldn't, and proceeded to kill those other two. It ended up in a massacre of like, yeah, they killed those three and got killed themselves. But you're also like, yeah, but they also kidnap people and are willing to like cut them open. You're selling people's organs. So it's not like they're good people. So it's not like good people died. But once again, I'm sure in this world it's like, yeah, the notion of good versus evil is like bullshit. It's like, yeah, everyone's trying to survive. Good people have done bad things. Bad people have probably done good things as well. So... And then ultimately kind of going into the notion of, and into the flow of things of, like, her ignorance led to her, like, Martha and them, like, who knows what their fate would have been. It probably would have been the end result either. I mean, there were other ghouls there that were, like I said, already feral. So were they just going to stay locked up forever? Were they going to be experimented on? Were their organs eventually going to be harvested if possible? But... there was no way around that. I guess like once you're gone, there's no coming back. But very much like I said with the iZombie thing, of once you go into feral, no matter even if you eat brains post going feral, you still can't come back. Your humanity will be gone forever. So none of them could have been saved. The vial can't like reverse anything that's done now that you've like crossed that threshold of you're too far gone. So. But Lucy ended up having to kill Martha, which is like, please, let's just have a conversation. And your name is Martha. I know it. Just like, please talk to me. And she ended up having to put her down. It's like, you wouldn't have had to do that if you weren't so. But it's like, it's so interesting too, considering she ended up getting the vials and handing some to Coop, being like, yo, you need these vials, right? See, the golden rule, motherfucker, of do unto others what you want done to you. So... now look at, you were treating me like shit, using me, tossing me around, cutting off my finger, and lo and behold, what happened? I brought you these vials. I was good to you, but it's also like, yeah, do unto others, but it's like your attempt to save Martha almost got you killed. So it's like, it's kind of like the double-edged sword of that. It's like, also saving him might come back to bite you in the ass, but her act of kindness could, like I thought last episode, I thought they might actually spend more time together, but it also makes sense that, you know, the story would break them up. Once again, all three of our characters going their separate ways. So it makes a lot of sense. I mean, really, it's like, it started off as the 3, but it is becoming 4 because we're getting the vault perspective with Norm, which we'll circle over to after this. But it's like, yeah, if you hadn't done what you did to Martha, which arguably you could be like, well, what you did for Martha is exactly what Coop did to Roger, which it's like, it's selfless and selfish at the same time, because hey, you killed Roger because you're doing him a service. Whether Coop realizes that or not, feels that way, like whether he was 100% like, not 100%, but at least there was some selfless notion of, right, I'm gonna like kill you while you're Roger, while you're still you, instead of like putting you down while you're not you anymore, and stop you from becoming one of those things. Like, no one wants to become that. He probably would hope someone would do him the kindness if he ever like got that far. So there's some selflessness there, but you're also getting something out of it by slicing off some ass jerky from Roger. Because I'm sure in his mind, it's like, yeah, if given the opportunity, Roger would have done the same thing for me. It's just, that's how, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and that's how we ghouls do it. But also, like, you know, Lucy's was a more, like, it was self-defense. It wasn't like I had a choice. It's like, it's either kill or be killed. So that's why I'm like, it's a little, now you're kind of a little in Cooper's shoes to understand why he did what he did. So, no, it's interesting to see what the lasting effects of this particular run is going to be. Once again, showing, like, Lucy's still Lucy, that she's handing out, like, you know, those vials and showing like she's still a good person, but the experiences and knowing what she did this episode might not change anything. It might solidify for her. It's like, no, I still did the right thing because all those other ghouls were released and they weren't bad. They were still human enough, whereas like every other ghoul that died inside that place were like already too far gone. Plus the two people here like selling organs are gone too. So it's also interesting how that also connects with, well, because that's also the selflessness of it angle versus the selfish angle when you think about it. And it's kind of layered because upon finding all those vials and stuff, which I love, he's knocking those back. I guess it's like, right, as long as you can stockpile it in your system of like, right, the more I'm drinking now, the less I have to do later on. So you kind of want to make the argument. He's like, well, shouldn't you stretch those out? It's like, well, I was already on the cusp, and I'm like, well, I need to build my system back up to being in a good place. Stretching it out won't do me any good because you also never know when shit will go sideways and you'll lose some of those. So you're like, might as well knock these back while I got the chance. But he ended up watching a video. It was like a VHS of sorts, like a tape with his movie on it. The one that he was doing it last episode in the flashbacks. And what I thought was so interesting is we see the final cut of the movie. That scene he was filming, the one where he's like, hey, I don't want to kill this guy in the scene, but it's like, well, you kind of have to. And we see in the end, he ended up having to kill the dude. But I also love that extra line of, yeah, you commie bastard or something like that. It's like, well, or twofold. There's that element to it, which I'm like, that line had to get thrown in because, you know, there's probably a little Red Scare element going on there. But also the fact is that the writer was supposedly found out to be a commie, so it's probably like why they included that as well. But the other thing is, going back to that line, he said like, right, you're ugly, strong, and had dignity. You have two of the three. And while that line's playing, the camera flips over and shows like Cooper listening to that, and it's like, right. So, which I'm sure you are two of the three. You are ugly and strong, but no dick. You know, it's meant to be the same thing. Which I'm like, oh, funny how once again haunted by your past in so many different ways. Whether it's the Vault Tech, like you're basically the poster child of Vault Tech essentially. But I mean, they changed things, but essentially you became that figure. They just changed your appearance and stuff for the actual like design of the promotion stuff. But it's all based on you. But also the element of those words coming back to haunt you all these years later of like, yeah, who you were, wanting to be a hero, wanting to do the right thing. Even in that movie, like, oh, let me just arrest the guy. But you were told to put him down. And it's just where you end up. You become the person that you were in that movie, even though that's not who you wanted to be in that movie. So the layers to that whole thing and just why, like, how he has that, like, almost like there's this, I don't know. It's like there's almost nothing, but also a layer of sadness to his face of just kind of like who he was, all that was, and who he became, and the irony behind it all. So, like I said, that whole thing has layers to it. Then we cut to everything in Vault 33, where obviously none of the Raiders are willing to give any information about who they are, what their ideology really is. But we go back to the whole thing with Norm talking to one of the higher up people, the lady, about, oh, she wanted to talk to Norm about the way he approached things, because it's like, right, with your dad going and your sister going, you're still a McLaren, and that holds a lot of weight. Which I should also note, I almost forgot, what I thought was interesting too, once Lucy said her last name, Coop was like, wait, what? So I wonder, does her family have a long lineage connected to Vault Tech? Like, why would he recognize that name unless it goes back to before Fallout? Like, maybe it makes sense if her family's connected to Vault Tech. It would make sense why her family would be in the bunkers. Because any people that are in those bunkers came from rich families that bought their way into those bunkers and vaults before shit hit the fan. So I'm sure Vault Tech people knew ahead of time when shit hit the fan. I mean, even if they found out last second, they were still prepared just in case, you know? So that is kind of interesting. But either way, the lady was making the point that Norm is because because of his family situation, like, you know, your dad being the overseer, and that would pass down to your older sister, but now that she's going to, your words hold a lot of weight. So it's like, right, people are scared and despondent after everything, and it's like, we don't need to be like trying to threaten to kill people. It's like, she says, boys like you are, you know, boys getting, she's like, I understand, like, you're angry, and she's like, that's understandable. Like, but normal boys getting angry, they'll piss on a wall. Clever boys, on the other hand, getting angry, she's like, well, I'm glad you never had to see that firsthand. Like, once again, I was like, it seems like you're leaning into it more and more with Norm going down the villain route, but it seems like maybe not, because it seems like Norm and the Vault 33 side of things is going to be about, I guess it's like different perspectives on hitting the truth, whether it's Lucy potentially finding out the truth through her route, or whether it's Norm during Vault 33 finding out the truth about things. Because when he was like feeding some of the prisoners, one of the guys was like, right, you think we're the bad guys? Like, maybe the people at Vault 32 weren't up to getting good before we got there, which he at the time was like, oh, that's BS. So he ends up recruiting Chet, which Chet went through it. Him meeting up with the whole him and Stephanie thing was so twisted and hilarious, where it's just like, she's like, obviously like, or like, oh yeah, my husband's gone, and it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, Chet was like, oh, all the things you could say about him. And Stephanie's like, go ahead, like, what nice things can you say? It's like, oh man, he loved the shoes. And she's like, yeah, he did. He's like, go ahead, you can keep him. He's like, sure, I will try and put them on when it's clearly very small shoes. And then she starts dressing him like her husband. And she's like, oh, was it Bert or Brett? I can't remember. She's hugging on him. And it's just like, I was like, oh God, this is about to get weird, isn't it? Especially when when she's climbing on top of him and like, they're like about to have sex. And he's about to take the clothes off. And she's like, no, keep it on. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. Of course. Like, why would I do that? Like, I know what this is. Like I meant to kind of play the role of your husband a little bit. And I love that they're like in the background, like, you know, it gets a little fuzzy as in the foreground is a painting of her husband, where I'm like, oh, this is so weird. And then he touches her and he's like, ooh, you're a wet lady. And then she hops up. I was like, oh, her water literally broke. I was like, this scene is so fucked, dude. Like, it's hilarious and twisted in that sense. And Chet was kind of like, yeah, when Norm came to him, was like, yo, let's go get out of here. He's like, yes, please. Because you can hear her like going into labor in the background. But they go over to Vault 32 to check stuff out. And considering, I guess no one else had really looked inside. I can't remember, like, was Lucy the one that went over to Vault 32 to see, like, stuff? I can't remember. Could we got a view of Vault 32 in episode 1, didn't? So, like, did Lucy go over there? I can't remember. But, like, I could have sworn we saw a shot of what it looked like. Maybe we didn't. I don't remember. It's been a little while since I saw episode 1. But they go in there and see, like, the crops and everything. It's like, right, this wasn't, like, a recent thing. This place was already kind of in bad shape beforehand. They checked the life thing of one of the guys, and it turns out, oh, they'd been like this for, like, 2 years. They died, like, 2 years ago. So it's like, right, even before the Raiders got here, they were already, like, Vault 32 was already in that situation. So they go in, find all these bodies, and it looks like there's this whole thing about we know the truth, and then they start, like, killing each other. At first I was like, is it a culling? Are they, like, killing each other for the purposes of, oh my God, we need to get some food? Or was it just we turned against each other and just everyone just killed each other? Because they went to management, and they're like, they had some message of, like, kill management or something like that, because, like, the main administrator of, I guess that was the overseer, is tied to the chair and he's dead. So it's like, what went down in this place? What? And because, like, Chet's like, oh, these people were crazy. So it's like, right, so even, like, they must have been so crazy that they let the Raiders in, but it turns out the Raiders didn't. They had a pit boy that let them in. It's like, well, how would they have gotten that? It's like, turns out the pit boy they used was Rose, Norm, and Lucy's mom. But, like, didn't her, because there was this whole notion, and this also ties back, and I've completely forgot about this. I'm glad it just clicked in my head, because Lucy said like there was like a plague that came through in like 77 and it killed her mom, and there was this whole thing of, right, we would have never gone through like some cannibalism route, and then there was a point that Cooper was making of like, oh yeah, there's a difference between someone say they're not going to do something versus what they actually do. Because he's like, yeah, I'm sure your dad was the first in line to get some food. So kind of implying like, right, you might think nothing, like, oh, there was nothing shady that went down to get through that plague. It's like, who's to say there wasn't? So makes you wonder what happened on that front. Like, was that the thing of they did some very unsavory stuff that either Lucy wasn't around at that time and didn't know, or she was so young and she is, as we know, very naive that she's going to believe what she was told. Because it's like, why would they lie? It's all about truth and being honest, but it's like, you know, there's secrets with the Vault. So it makes you wonder, what did Vault 32 discover for them to turn against each other, like want to kill management? Maybe this has something to do with like the fallout of everything, like what happened back then, and was it something in the past? Was it something present day that made them turn against them? Especially if it was like 2 years ago, this all went to shit. So, well, I forgot to talk about it last episode. Vault 33 only has like it was 2 months worth of like water, like the chip that kind of helps, like, I guess with the water, maybe purifying it or whatever, or maybe just giving them water in general. They only have 2 months of water before it runs out. So I completely forgot about that detail from last episode when I was talking about last episode. So it's like the question then becomes, is that why Moldaver took Lucy and Norm's dad? Because there's some connection with, like, I wonder, was Rose an implant? But it's like, no, because can't be, right? Because she was already part of the vaults. Like, no one went from the, not unless there's stuff, or if like maybe the vaults had been open before, but maybe they came back and pretended like they never, like maybe Rose had left or her dad had left. Like, there's something there, because it's like Moldaver like going specifically after Lucy and Norm's dad, and it seems like they had some connection to her mom too. So that's what I was like, it could be that she was like a raider in disguise and then just stayed and left everything behind. Like, not unless their dad let her in. But it's like, how could did he pretend like she was from a different vault? Like, they would be able to check that stuff, right? I don't know where that's going to go. I'm so interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. Like, a lot of questions, because obviously, like, one thing going into the show I was hearing was like, oh yeah, there's like a big mystery, and I'm curious to see how this unravels, finding out whatever Wilzig's situation is, Moldaver, like what her connection is to Lucy's mom and dad, if any. You'd assume there is, but once again, like, why Cooper even knows Lucy's family name, like why that even registered him, like, right, that's your last name? Huh. We'll ultimately have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.